And now we're ready to go. We can tell it's the second day because you're wearing red instead of white.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the chamber music because it was very important in my years at the university. First of all, in the beginning we had Felix Salmon, and he was the great English cellist, and he terrified me. I remember the first time I went in there with the piano quartet was with Joe Batista was the pianist, and Myrtle Walsfeld was the violist, and who was the cellist? Well, anyway, we played a Brahms piano quartet, which was the first time in my life I had ever played chamber music. And I was playing my part, and he came over to me. He loomed like a giant. He was a very tall man anyway. And with English sideburns, he was a character. And he said, "What are you doing over there, girl?" And I said, "Oh, I'm playing my part." And he said, "Oh, all that you know about bowing and about fingering is any fool's nose." And he really tore me apart. And for a first lesson in chamber music, it decimated me. I came out of there crying, and I said, "I'll never go back in there again." And I refused to go back. And one day he said to Joe Batista, "What happened to your piano quartet?" And they said, "Oh, Fredell says she'll never come in here again." And she says, "You were just too rough for her." Well, he said, "Tell her to come back in, and I'll try to behave myself." And so I went back in, and he said, "Do it like this, dear." And he was trying so hard to... Anyway, we grew to be great friends. And I loved him because he was so knowledgeable. And he was a great chamber music coach. And I'm not the only one that says that. Bobby Mann started talking about him too. Anyway, all the 5 years I was at Juilliard, every concert, one number was by Bobby Mann's group, and one was my group. I mean, that was all the way through. We were the only two groups that ever performed. At least that's my recollection. I remember one night they woke me up in the middle of the night and they said, "We have an emergency. There's a concert tomorrow, and our violinist is ill. She can't play." And it was a work that I had never played before. And they coached me on it all night long. And the next day I played it in the concert. So these are the tender memories I carry with me. Of course, one of the people we idealized was Willie Capel. He played with us, and he was extraordinary. And Of course, Bobby Mann was always outstanding. From the time he came into the school, he was very commanding. And I envied him so. I envied him. Not that his playing was so wonderful, but his brain was so wonderful. The way he could analyze everything. And that's true, I'm sure, up to till today. He was playing very modern works long before any of us were. I mean, I didn't get around to Stravinsky or Bartok or any of those till much later after he had performed them all. I do want to say that my quartet explored everything. We played all 6 Bartok quartets, and we played Stravinsky, and we played everything we could possibly play. I always wanted to play all of everything. All the violin works, all the chamber music work. It was my greediness. Well, now in my quartet, there had been some really distinguished members. I say my quartet, it was the university quartet. But at times, there was Stephen Ansell, and then there was, I don't know, were you my second violist?
Well, I think before that was Wayne Krause. Wayne Krause was way back.
Yes.
And then Steve Ansell, and then I came after Steve.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Wayne Krause was there first. It broke my heart when he and Shirley Trepel left our quartet and went to Rice. I couldn't believe they could do that. And I didn't know about it. But they said they knew I wouldn't leave the University of Houston. Anyway, the second violin, what was his name?
Before Al, he was in the symphony.
Yes.
Let's see. I'm not remembering his name.
He was from Russia. He came from a family of musicians.
Oh, yes, Wilkomirski.
Wilkomirski, that's right. And he was...
It may have been Polish. May have been
Polish,
yes.
Right. And he was a delight. I enjoyed him. And then after that, you were after that.
Well, Al Munzer was
second
violin after Mr. Wilkomirski.
Yes.
And he was with you many years.
Oh, yes. Oh, I was devoted to Al.
And he to you.
Uh-huh.
I remember one of the very first things he said after I was hired. He said, "To know Fredell is to love her."
Oh, my goodness. Well, I thought he was such a good violinist. I thought, why would somebody who plays that well want to play second violin in a quartet? And I always felt grateful to him because I thought he should have been he should have been first, you know.
Well, he was a fantastic violinist.
Yes, he
I mean,
was.
with a facility and musicality that
I never heard him play a note out of tune.
that's true. That's true.
I told him that.
Yeah. But he had an incredible respect for you, Fredell, and he knew that your knowledge of chamber music was greater than his.
Well, he's been a commercial violinist for a lot of his life,
That's right.
but he could play anything.
That's right. And with that wonderful style,
Uh-huh.
old school Viennese style that is unfortunately disappearing.
Well, anyway, I loved Al, and he stayed in the group for a long time. Who have I left out?
Well, you
Cellist.
had cello.
Uh-huh. I haven't talked about. We had
Shirley Trepel.
Shirley Trepel,
Mm-hmm.
and she and Wayne left and went to Rice. Shirley was a wonderful talent and a wonderful cellist, but she was not such a wonderful person. And I shouldn't say that in public like this, but we would receive offers to play concerts, and then she would tell us the day before the concert, "Oh, I'm not going to go with you." And you can't do that, Shirley. You're part of the group. Well, she didn't care about anybody else. Anyway, we did a Brahms double concerto. I remember. I didn't want to play with her because we had a falling out, and I thought it was too mean of the symphony to put the two of us together in a program. Anyway, I had to play it because we were booked by the symphony, and all the way through the rehearsals, she said, "Now, I've played this hundreds of times with my husband, Burleson Husky, so I know every fingering, every shading, I know everything. So you either do it my way or we won't do it." And I was forced to do everything she wanted. And it was a humiliating experience for me. And when it was over, she came into my dressing room and threw her arms around me and said, "Fredell, darling, I've been so mean to you. Can you forgive me?" How about that? Well, that was Shirley. Anyway, she was a character. She was very much admired. She was an extraordinary cellist. She'd been a pupil of great cellists at
Was she with Piatigorsky or Feuermann?
Feuermann.
Feuermann.
She was Feuermann. And the original cellist was
I'm afraid I can't help on that one.
it was Shirley's predecessor. She was the other child genius.
Oh, Marion Davies.
Marion Davies.
Yeah.
That's right. Marion Davies and Shirley were the two geniuses. genius young cellists at Curtis. One
That's
was Foreman and one was Piatigorsky.
right.
Anyway, after that, we had Hans Jensen, and he took a little patience. He was so wonderful. He had such a great sense of humor, and we never knew whether he would do something the same way twice. There's no order to it. And he didn't practice very much. His students used to lock him in the practice room so he would practice. Anyway, I loved Hans, and I still do. And he left and went someplace to build a class of students. Northwestern, and he has built a wonderful class of students. They've won all the prizes.
He's been called the greatest cello teacher in the world.
He has?
He has.
Uh-huh. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, you were the longest lasting violinist in our group. And I don't want to leave anybody out, but you were predominantly in our group. I'm talking to Larry Wheeler, and he was wonderful. He had such wonderful musical ideas. And I think we all grew with him in the group.
I learned a lot from you, Fredell.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't always agree because we were both rather passionate about the music, and that's often the case in chamber music. But I always had the greatest respect for you and a great love for you, which continues now, you know.
Well, now we're older and our tempers are more under control. Anyway, I don't think there's anything more I have to say.
Well, I have a few questions, if I may. You mentioned some of your classmates at the Juilliard. You mentioned Bobby Mann, and you made a reference to Karen Tuttle. I think everybody would be very interested to hear more about these very distinguished and well-known musical personalities and your connection with them and your feelings about them or towards them.
Music personalities? You mean who taught at the school?
No, your classmates.
My classmates.
And roommates like Bobby Mann or Karen Tuttle. I mean, you were part of a very distinguished group.
Well, I knew Karen Tuttle before she came to the Little Orchestra. She heard me rehearsing backstage for one concert. I was the concertmaster of the Little Orchestra Society, and she was playing in the orchestra, and she heard me rehearsing one day, and she said, "Oh, I like your style. I like your style." I didn't know who she was or how she played, but later I heard. And I tried to bring her back when I had the power to give a master class at the school. But she was not well then.
Well, I remember that there were 2 master classes on 2 days that she gave, and I remember that quite well. And as a matter of fact, there is a video of that class. I've been trying to hunt down all parts of it. I just have one part of it. I will say that I know what you were talking about. She had some going in and out as far as her memory and just, keeping track of things. But when she was teaching, it was all there and crystal clear, and just, it was
With whom did she study?
She studied with Primrose at Curtis. I believe that was her primary teacher. She became his assistant.
Well, it's wonderful, the descent of these people from previous artists.
Right.
I mean, when I think about who the teachers were of some of the people, I mean, Willie Capel, it was the genius, but he was studying with Olga Summeroff, who had been married to Stokowski, and she had been a great concert pianist, and Bobby Mann was always disappointed that he did not get Persinger as his teacher when we were assigned teachers. That's who he wanted, and he did not get Persinger.
Who did he study with? Who did he study with?
Hans Leck.
Okay.
Does that name sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Well, he was not a particularly outstanding violinist or teacher. Anyway, you didn't change teachers once you were given one.
Well, teaching and learning in music is very much an oral tradition, and you can demonstrate on your instrument how things should or could sound, but there were plenty of teachers who were not great players who could describe quite well the music. Galamian, and I would say Sally Thomas, and
was she a great teacher?
Sally, for some people, yes, absolutely. But that was more or less on or off with her. Either you got along or you didn't. There was very little in between.
Well, I don't think we ever really liked each other.
That's fine. That's
Oh, yeah.
She may have been a little jealous of your relationship with Mr. Galamian, because he was very fond of you and she was very
Fond of him.
fond of him.
Right. He sometimes used to say to me, "Oh, I wish I'd met you when I was young." No, he was very fond of me. But you know, I was not the kind of a girl that would have a sexual relationship with a teacher. It was just not in my makeup. But I loved him. Freddie, Freddie, he would say. He never called me Fredell. It was always Freddie. Anyway, I was very happy around him. I never knew where his knowledge of the violin came from. He must have had teachers in Russia.
He studied with Capet
Oh, he did?
in Paris.
That was why he had the bow arm
That's
technique.
right. He was there the same time as Jasha Brodsky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, Josh. Did you come in to say hello?
Yes,
Hi.
he did. Isn't he a sweet dog?
He is sweet. Very sweet.
Well, Milton Katims was my suggestion to head the music department. I had thought about all these people who were academics, and they didn't have any real understanding of the problems of those of us who were performers. And I suggested Milton Katims, and he was out of a job at that moment because Seattle Symphony was, I don't know, changing conductors. And he came down, and he was, what's the word, ebullient.
Ebullient?
Ebullient.
I'm not sure I'm saying it right.
Ebullient. Well, anyway, he was sparkling all the time. And he was so little, and his wife was so big. And it was a funny combination, but he adored her. That didn't keep him from pinching a few bottoms. Anyway, he was wonderful when he was conducting something for the students. And he was a very good conductor. You know, especially for strings.
Well, he played in the NBC Symphony on first stand with
I know.
Toscanini.
I know. Well, his sympathies were always with the performers. And the conductors. We had a conducting school, and there were some talents there, and they went on to do a lot of things. I can't remember their names.
Well, there was Pavel Yarvi.
Yes.
Remember him?
Uh-huh.
He has a very big career now.
He does.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm so happy.
He's he's made several recordings, and he's given several concerts with Hilary Hahn.
Good.
Yes, he's terrific.
Uh-huh.
He's following in his father's footsteps, Nami
Yes.
Yarvi.
Good. Well, it helps when you have a father who's already successful.
Right.
But he wasn't the only conductor we had.
No. Yeah. Well, there was Leon Spear's son, Carlos.
Uh-huh.
Carlos Spear. Um,
Leon was a very dear friend of mine from the days when I first went to Germany. He wasn't in the Berlin Philharmonic yet, and he took a liking to me and invited me to, to his house for dinner many times. And I was crazy about him, but of course I would never have done anything about it. But he was soft spoken and sweet, and he played beautifully.
yes.
And
Yeah, he came to Texas Music Festival several times.
at my suggestion.
Yeah. And one time, I remember he did a concert where he sat concertmaster and led the orchestra from the concertmaster spot. And among other things, they did Schubert B-flat Symphony. And that was quite an experience because it's like getting the information straight from the source on Schubert, and Leon Speer having his tradition from Berlin Philharmonic. It was quite an experience for the kids.
I still hear from him. He calls me every Christmas Day.
Well, that's coming up in just a couple of days, so would you give him my best, please?
I sure will.
He's quite a musician.
He is a dear person. I was a good friend to both him and his wife, and she died mysteriously. I don't know. I think there was something between the two of them that was not good. She was from Argentina. He was originally from Argentina also. There were a lot of Germans who went to Argentina.
That's right.
Well, anyway, I'm trying to think of everybody else that might be of interest to people in the future.
Well, I think people are very interested in you and your experiences. Let me ask you, because really you have quite a legacy as a teacher, and there must be hundreds of students that have worked with you and benefited from your input. And you've talked about some of those students, but let me ask you, what pieces are you particularly fond of teaching? Now, I want you to begin with Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, because you recorded that, and I have heard Joe Gingold say that that was his favorite recording of the Mendelssohn.
All I know is that he once called me after I had broadcast from Canada, and he had heard it, and he told me he loved hearing it. That Mr. Gingold was a warm person. He gave compliments whenever he felt was worthy of it. And I never studied with him. I always kind of sat around on the outside and tried to glean what little drops of knowledge he gave. But I do have Isaiah sonatas with some of his markings on it. He was a pupil of Isaiah, as Persinger was. And he told me that the sonata that everybody plays is the first one they play. It's number
3, the ballad.
Ballad.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. He said he played the first performance of it.
Wow.
And he had markings on his music, which he put on my music. And things that had been changed by other artists, he said, were not true, were not right. And I have that copy of the Isaiah sonatas with his markings on it.
Well, I had suggested, and I would love to follow up on having all of your music scanned so that it would be preserved.
All my music, what?
Have your music scanned.
Scanned.
Right. It's like making a photocopy.
Uh-huh.
So it could, because, eventually paper will deteriorate, but a picture of the music will be preserved. And that would be good.
Well, you'll find things on it like E flat, idiot. I wrote notes on everything.
Was that notes that you wrote yourself, or did
myself.
Felix Salmon write that?
I wrote myself. I would get mad when I didn't play well.
Mm.
And I would get very angry, and I would have to childishly destroy the music in some way. I mean, Gloria Justin, who's one of my most successful violinists, brought me back the G minor Bach sonata, and there's not a measure that doesn't have an instruction in it, a marking in it, a shaping in it. It's got. I had to tell them what my vision of each note was.
Well, that's so valuable, and it would be good to preserve that. And we would have to make sure that the scans are in color, because I understand you would use different colored pencil.
That's right.
Depending on which iteration you...
That's right. I mean, the first time they came, it was one color. When they came back, second time was a different color. That's right. They laughed about it, but I tell you, the symphony musicians, when I would go to play with the symphony, would take a look at my music and just howl. They thought it was so funny that I had to write everything down. But I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing your quartet parts, and you had the entrance for every instrument marked in your music.
Uh-huh. That's the way I learned it.
Yeah. And kept it together.
Well, I don't know. For people like Bobby Mann, they probably looked at it and had it all in their mind. But I had to write it down so I could remember lunch with me. One of them is Karen Wilkinson, and the other one is Kay Balzer. I taught them years ago. Well, it's sweet to have them call and see how are you, you know. Well, where were we?
Let's see, we were talking about how you marked up your parts, but you played all your concertos from memory.
Yes.
And you probably could have played all your sonatas from memory.
Mm-hmm.
So even with all the marking, and people have different ways of memorization.
It told me what to tell my students too.
Uh-huh.
They looked at the parts and they knew what I wanted. And the images, that came from Persinger. I didn't do what he said, but the idea of giving an image of something was very effective with students. Of course, I could never tell any of them the intoxicating joy it was for me to play the violin. That's my secret. Actually, I should have been on another instrument. I don't have really the hands of a violinist.
Could have fooled me.
Well, anyway, I look at your young son who plays the cello so beautifully, and I think that was really the instrument of my heart. And he's going to have a wonderful career.
We're very proud of him.
You should be. I love the cello. That was the reason I chose the violin that I did. Mm-hmm. It has such a great lower region, the D and the G string. I mean, when I got up on the G string, it was just... Beginning of the Elgar Concerto. I remember doing that on the G string. You know, I never played that in public. Yes, I did. When I retired, I said to Tim Hester, there's one concerto I've never played in public. And let's do the Elgar the next concert, because I want to say I've played them all. So then I played the Elgar. And I loved it, and I wish I'd played it sooner. It's a deeply romantic work. Well, we've had a wonderful time, you and I, talking about all these years. And I hope we'll have some more years. And I've loved this school. When I remember that I was the first string player there, I was the second person. Albert Hirsch was the first. And we started on a shoestring. And I see it now, and it's so successful, and it looks so good. And I'm proud of it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these stories and thoughts, Fredell. It's going to be very meaningful to a number of people.
Thank you, Larry. You've been wonderful. You've been a wonderful friend. and I've learned a lot from you in all these years, and you deserve a fine career.
Thank you.